For this afternoon, we have 3 speakers, and the main focus of the discussion is to not only to improve the collection of data, but to better the analysis and the learning element of data use for the end users, but also for the developer. And we have 2 organizations. One is Akvo, which is a non-profit organization which develops platform and software for collecting data, but and also analyzing and learning, or the to use the data for decision making. And the other organization is the Interchurch Organization for Development Cooperation. And we have 2 speakers from Akvo in the order of speeches. Charlotte Soedjak is the project manager. She is responsible for the accounts and monitoring and evaluation and business partnerships, and she's based in Amsterdam, and she looks after all the countries. And to my further left is Stefan Kraus. He's the regional manager for the Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and he looks after many countries in the Pacific and countries like Indonesia. He's the environmental economist, and Charlotte is agricultural and natural resources specialist. And to my right is Ms. Marijke de Graaf, and she's the food and nutrition security expert. And I understand that the ICCO is the client, but also partner to Akvo for improving this software or platform that Akvo has developed. And I heard also that Akvo originally started from the water supply sector, but gradually expanding its coverage to other sectors such as health, agriculture, energy, and transport. Okay, so without further ado, Charlotte, floor is yours.
Yes. So yeah, welcome to this session on from data to decision, which will talk a bit about collecting, analyzing, and using of high-quality data to increase impact. So I realize it's approaching the end of the second day already, and it's yeah, you're probably already getting a bit tired of a 2-day event. So hopefully you do still have some energy left to hear us out and also hopefully participate in the discussion later on. So perhaps first at Akvo we develop software to support organizations in collecting, analyzing, but also visualizing data, but also monitoring, reporting, and basically we provide that software as a service to organizations. So we support partners in the collecting and analyzing and sharing of data. So just to go back, so from data to decision, what do we mean by that? So it's essentially should I stay closer? Yeah. Sorry, I'll try to stand still. So essentially it's a process of capturing data, analyzing that data, and then also disseminating and sharing that data, right? So that can be broken down then in a few smaller steps, which are already big enough in itself, like designing, surf and design, then going out to collect your data accordingly, and then analyzing, obviously, and looking at how to disseminate and share the data and your results. I had slides. So some developments that are driving the availability of data. So just to name a few. So technology, I think, is a big one. It's also widely been discussed during this event. There is a wide availability of like mobile data collection tools or data collection tools, which make it really easy to collect large amounts of data. Another development would be the fact that we have a lot of open data available, and there is increasingly a push for sharing data publicly. And then also the Sustainable Development Goals are obviously driving a large demand for data. So these are just some developments that that make that we have a lot of data available, and that's still increasing. So that also poses challenges, right? So because having a lot of data available doesn't necessarily mean it's good quality data. In fact, a lot of it is messy data, or it's increasingly fragmented in different sources, which makes it harder to find and harder to use. So it's much easier to actually collect new data than to discover knowledge in your data. And therefore, I think as a sector, we really need to focus on collecting high quality data, and very importantly, also looking at what data is already existing and what's already out there, to be more efficient in what we are doing. So making sense, or not making sense, but making the most out of the data that's there. So one way of doing that is data science, and that can help you in getting the most out of your data and the existing data there. So basically, data science aims to discover knowledge in your data. So you first need to really understand what your problem is very well. So as you don't go further into solving the wrong problem, which sounds obvious, but yeah, that can happen. So are you asking the right questions? So in terms of survey design, already think ahead as to what do you want to, what data do you want to have, what are the results that you have in mind. Then decide what data sources you're going to use, because there are so many out there, but see what existing data is already there, so you don't go and collect perhaps the same data again. And then also, of course, know how to combine different data sets, which is not an easy thing to do. But that's really where the added value lies. Data cleaning, obviously, is an important one. Even with good quality data sets, if you're going to use it for your own purposes, you still need to clean your data and really get familiar with a data set in order to combine them and use them well. So data exploration is important to do to find patterns in your data, and look at the data to see which parts are significant to answer the questions that you have. And then try to dig even deeper, and perhaps there are ways to do modeling and predictions from the data that you have. They can be valuable tools for decision making. And then obviously don't forget to communicate the insights in a compelling and in an understandable way. So in this session, we'll present a case in which we'll discuss some of these components. But first, I'd like to give the word to my colleague Stefan, who will dive a little bit deeper into the data to decision process. So.
Thanks, Charlotte. And just to reiterate, I realize it's the end of the day, so I'm going to try and keep it short. I think the 17-minute rule from yesterday was a good one, but hopefully I'll keep it even shorter than that. So what I might do first is just to add a little bit of additional context to what Charlotte mentioned about Akvo as an organization. I really don't want to talk about us as an organization here too much, but just for context, we're a global not-for-profit. I'm based in Australia, and we have hubs around the world. We have a little over 100 staff across East Africa, West Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia and Pacific is my region, US, Latin America. And we work with a range of partners across the UN system, governments, NGOs, and even a few corporates. And I think the sort of unique thing a little bit that allows us to talk in more detail about this data to decision process is that we are not just a tools provider, but we actually are involved in implementation, and we partner with organizations to implement smartphone-based data collection systems and other systems. So really briefly, I'll just talk this slide. It's probably very difficult to see, but essentially what it's showing is a range of different IT systems that we've developed, and I think the core here is that they appear on a continuum that says capture, understand, share, which is really what Charlotte is talking about as well, which is the sort of data to decision continuum. And we sort of have that at the heart of our organization, and we think it's actually really critical that organizations in the sector and our partners are also thinking about data to decision. So I'm going to leave Akvo behind there and stop talking about us. But what I will, so I've sort of shifted based on the last day and a half of hearing conversations. I'm shifting a little bit the conversation or the presentation here. Originally, I was going to present in more detail a case study that we recently commenced with Mars Foods, and that's with rice farmers in Pakistan. In fact, I am just going to skim through that and go more to sort of the zoomed out level lessons for initiating smartphone-based data collection. And I think that's probably where there are some good lessons to be shared, and probably a good opener for some further discussions. So yeah, I'm going to focus on two important lessons through the next 7 to 10 minutes. So the first one is, at the risk of making this sound like an echo chamber, I think it's really important to continue reiterating the fact that the tools really don't matter, and it's the use of the tools and that human side that's critical, and that's really kind of the success factor when we're talking about data initiatives. Having said that, there are a few basic considerations when thinking about smartphone-based or mobile-based data collection that I think are relevant for everyone in this room. So I'm going to go through a few of those. And then the second sort of key takeaway from my part will be looking at some of the additional things that are important in the design of a data collection and analysis and visualization initiative that sit beyond, like, around the tools. Because often it's very easy to focus on the technology because it's there and it's sort of innovative, but it's also really critical to think about everything else that sits around that to make sure that the data is of high quality. So I'm also going to try and not say data too many times because, yeah. So let me jump ahead a little bit to here. Now, this is just very quickly. This initiative that we undertook with Mars was to transform a paper-based process for working with local farmers in Pakistan, rice farmers, to a digital process, a smartphone-based process, to assist the local supplier and Mars and the farmers in their certification or their achievement of certification standards for the rice that they were farming. And I think it's sort of a process that we go through with with most of our partners, is shifting away from paper but doing it in a smart way so that results are easy to achieve, and also to feed back to the users or the sources of the data, in this case farmers, and also everyone else involved. So with that, I'm just going to sort of leave that aside, and I might come back to it a little bit later. But what I will say is we sort of see the smartphone-based data collection technology side of things as basically solved, in a sense. There are a suite of different software offerings out there for smartphone-based and mobile-based data collection. And many of them, well, they're all very good, and many of them have similar sets of features and similar models for use. So typically what we see across our partners and across others when they go to try to initiate a process of transforming or shifting from paper-based to digital, they tend to look at feature sets. So, does this tool number one what are the features that are involved there versus tool number 2 versus tool number 3, and that's how they compare them and ultimately make a choice. But there are a few, and that's fine, I think that's okay, but there are a few other important things to think about when comparing different software offerings. So a few of them, actually there are 7, just the first is scale. So is the system, does it match, does the scale of the system and the capacity of the system match the scale that you'll be operating at? The second one is sustainability of the platform and of the software, because we often see sort of free software out there, and it's important to question. I mean, there's no such thing as free. So who's paying, or if it's a community-based initiative, which is also great, who's sort of end responsible for ensuring that, because data is highly valuable. So that's the second thing. Security has been discussed, and I think that's also very important. Not just the security protocols, but also data housing. Where is it housed, and what are the regulations around data in those locations where data is actually housed? Open source, so source code and sound design principles are also really important. Then user capacity. So what sort of capacity do your users have, and is there support available if they need it? Then the last 2 really are data ownership. So is it clearly defined and agreed? And does the system, is it fit for use, and is it fit for your users? So are there language barriers, for example? If the data collection initiative needs to happen in Bahasa, Indonesia, for example, is that possible with the system? So I just wanted to put sort of those things out there, because they are quite critical, and we often see organizations sort of fall into the trap of just comparing functionality. But once that's clear, it's very important to just sort of leave the tools behind. It's no longer. I'm a real advocate for making sure that the tool is fit for purpose and does what it should do, and then leave it behind and move on to the important process of actually designing an initiative that works, and that works in order to collect quality data. So I mentioned that we think of mobile-based data collection as sort of being solved, but that's really from a technical perspective. Okay, so the risk, and I think what we are starting to see a bit more, is that the quick and easy access to data actually doesn't result most of the time, or all the time, in good data being generated. So what happens is, data is easy to access, and sometimes that leads to messy data being generated, which then leads to an increase in cleaning requirements, an increase in analysis requirements, and then visualization and sort of transformation of the data becomes complex as well. So I really think the critical part of the equation is that in order to turn technology into innovation, it's really important to have that design aspect well sorted. So, in fact, the different way of thinking about data collection for digital versus paper or analog is, with digital, a lot of the work and the design work is actually front-ended. With a paper-based initiative, typically the data collection happens, it comes back, and then the real investment happens in transforming that into something useful. With a digital process, actually a lot of the design needs to happen at the front end, so that the process can flow smoothly. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But some of the key considerations, and I won't talk much longer, for getting to this sort of data to decision model where data is being generated that's of high quality and can be useful for decision making. The first one is around the data collection is only one piece of the puzzle. So it's really important to think about who will be involved in cleaning the data, who will be involved in analyzing it, and what kind of visualization, or what we just talked about, visualization for impact, what kind of visualization is going to be required? And thinking about that from the beginning avoids the potential bottleneck of having incoming data and then not having the capacity to analyze it and to clean it, to analyze it, and to visualize it in the ways that are needed. The second point is designing with and for end users. This has also been raised quite a lot, but it's simple stuff. But defining who the end users are is really important, and identifying what they need to know and how they need to use these data as they come in. Having those end users actually in the room during the early stages of design and sort of implementation is really valuable, actually. And we've run processes with governments, for example, in Fiji, where ministers and heads of ministries were in the room talking about, for example, in disaster response, what kind of information is required for a rapid assessment after a cyclone, for example. And actually having them in the room and having them tell the group what they actually ultimately need, and then working back from that makes a huge difference. Suddenly we can identify the indicators, and that can inform the analysis process. Step back, that can inform the survey design, and even the data collection process. So these are really important, and the digital process really means that they can be involved in the actual rollout, in the early stages of the rollout of the system. So training and iteration. I think training is one thing that's often overlooked, and I think we've heard it a little bit the last 2 days, is that training, as easy as using a smartphone is, actually sometimes it's important to have some specific training on smartphone-based data collection, and I won't go into it too much, but that adequate training is important. Then survey design and consistency in collection. Designing for digital is a little bit different to designing for a paper-based data collection initiative. So sort of it can lead to problems if a paper survey is designed and then just digitized. What's much better generally is to actually look for ways of maximizing the benefits of digital and limiting the shortcomings of digital. So if we're talking about smartphone-based, the ability to include photos, the ability to include geolocations, these kinds of things, actually that can be really powerful for a data set. And if you take a paper-based survey and simply digitize that, you potentially miss the opportunity to do that. Another example is free text. So typically, many paper-based surveys include quite a bit of free text, but typing free text into a smartphone can be a little bit problematic. Not only is it a bit more time-consuming, it also, there's a greater chance of errors coming into the data and creating sort of messy data that then needs to be cleaned. So, so those things are really important. And I think the consistency is also quite critical. Ensuring that enumerators understand and understand the way that a digital survey is being designed and how to ask the questions is really important. And I think that obviously goes for paper-based as well. Data analysis, so who and sort of capacity, I think I touched on it already. Data ownership feedback loops we've talked about already, and I won't go into too much detail, but there is an opportunity with smartphone-based data collection to actually share results with the owner of the data, or the source of the data on the spot. So this use case with Mars, we actually digitized a certification standard, and during the data collection process, already were coming up with results and scoring for each farmer that could be shared back with them at the end of the process. So this is an opportunity. I think it's important to look at ways of making sure that that feedback can already happen as early as possible through the data collection initiative. Yeah, and then the final ones there are designing for data aggregation and integration. One challenge that we're also seeing arise more and more is that organizations are sort of using different platforms, and I think that's fine, that's great, but if we want data sets to be integrated, for example, at national levels or even compared across countries, it's important to think about the sort of standards or the standard approaches to data collection in a digital format. So what I mean by that is, if, for example, there is a census of schools happening, and schools are being analyzed by one set of surveys for education results and another set of surveys for water sanitation infrastructure, those two data sets can potentially be compiled and aggregated into a single data set, but it's important that the way that those schools are being analyzed and the sort of districts that are being used to integrate or to collect those schools is comparable across data sets, if you know what I mean. Similarly, if we're talking about different national data sets, it's important that the way that boundaries are defined is consistent. And that also goes for disaggregation as well. So thinking about consistent ways. And I think that's, as a community, something that we need to think about a lot more. And the last one is just sensitivity. So some of those are generic across data collection initiatives, whether it's digital or other. But for digital, there are some interesting new sensitivities that arise. So one example is that with geo mapping and creating GPS-based boundaries, we ran into this in Indonesia when we were interviewing small-scale farmers and helping them to map the boundaries of their farms. It actually turned out that there were quite some political sensitivities in terms of the boundaries of farms, and there were quite some overlapping boundaries. So as soon as we started to put those down on a map, it led to some pretty heated discussions. So understanding that that there are sometimes sort of unstated political agreements between different organizations, between different individuals, yeah, that. Well, I don't need to say anything more about that. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, and I'll hand over to Marijke, who's going to go through some really interesting examples.
Hello, good afternoon. I will move on quickly. It was already mentioned that I'm from ICCO, a Dutch development organization, and we have been working several years intensively with Akvo Flow. So we are more, I'm going to tell the story a bit from the user's side. I will talk very briefly about ICCO and how we look at monitoring and evaluation, the tools, and some successes and challenges. Very briefly about ICCO. We have been working since 1964, focusing mainly on rural areas in all the continents. The main focus is securing sustainable livelihoods for rural areas, particularly smallholder farmers, with a focus on women and youth. And we also pay a lot of attention to justice and dignity for all, so it's more the human rights-based approach. We have three main themes, which is food and nutrition security, it's economic empowerment, and it's responsible business. And we do work in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. We have our headquarters in Utrecht, the Netherlands, and we have presentations in 5 regions and 21 countries. Since 2008, we have been decentralized. So far about ICCO. Let me move on quickly to becoming data-driven. Yeah, since several years, we pay much more attention not only to data for baselines and for endlines evaluation and reporting to our donors, but we have come to realize that data is much more also very important for our own learning, and in addition also for more lobby and advocacy type of issues, to have more evidence-based lobby and advocacy and learning. So there is this components of gathering, analysis, and use it for the program implications. I think Charlotte and Stephen have talked about that quite extensively. Let me focus a bit on what type of tools we are using. My background is food and nutrition security, so I'm biased to that area. Actually, what we have been doing is the issue of how are we going to measure impact, and not specifically on smallholder farmers, really on the end target group. And what we actually do, because we are a development organization, so we're not so much a research institute nor a very technical institute. So we make use as much as possible of type of indicators that are out there, that are recommended by institutes like FAO, like IFPRI, and WHO, and for example, IFAD. And we also use tools like the ones from Akvo, and we try to combine that in a way that it's easy to use, and that we can kind of replicate it, and that we can go for standards. So in the case of food security, what we did is look at what the FAO is recommending, and we started to use the household food insecurity access scale. And actually, it's a little bit a way of analyzing food and nutrition security, not by looking at malnourishment, to look at anthropometric data and to see whether children are already undernourished or women already suffering from anemia. But we try to look at the stages before that and see what is happening at the household food security, about the access to food at household level. And we also have started to use that not only for our food and nutrition security programs, but we said that if we focus on income generation, increase of production, access to markets, farmer cooperatives, the household food security situation could be a very interesting proxy indicator for livelihood improvement. So we said this having a way to measure about the household food security could be a very interesting thing to do. So we started to use this indicator for about 8 years now, and it's actually based upon a USAID developed indicator, where they did a lot of research about how do people react to situations of food insecurity, and they have found different stages of how people react. And actually, they have developed 3 different stages besides being food secure. And the first phase of people starting to become more food insecure is that people start to worry about whether they will be able to provide sufficient food to their families in the coming weeks, in the coming months. So that is a way of, which I mentioned here, it's anxiety about access to food. If the situation gets worse, then people start to compromise the quality. So they might start to choose foods that are less expensive. What you often see is that they start to use less animal protein, because usually these are more expensive. So they start to adjust the quality of their diets. And then the last phase is that they start to adjust the quantity. So those 3 phases, and based on that analysis, they have developed a set of 9 related questions, and these questions are kind of closed questions. A person could say yes or no about the situation in their household. So because it is the characteristic of this indicator, and because it's an indicator that has been validated broadly internationally, we found it very useful to apply it, to go more for a standard. And it also was very useful, or we could easily use it in Akvo Flow. As Stefan already mentioned, you have to do some adjustments, or the questions have to be, it's better when they are closed. So in this case, that has been working quite well. So besides this household food insecurity access scale, we also look at the diet, quality of the diet, which is another indicator. Another one is looking a little bit more at income levels at households, for which we use the progress out of poverty indicator. And another very important one is the women empowerment, which we think is also a very interesting thing to measure at household level. It has a direct link with income and also food security. And maybe just very briefly about challenges. For the women empowerment, we look at an IFPRI recommended indicator, which is a paper-based questionnaire which has many, many pages and a lot of questions. And we are still in the process of seeing how we could transform this paper-based questionnaire into Akvo Flow. So this is something that we are working on right now. Let me move on. I had prepared something about data gathering, but I think it has been covered very well by Charlotte and Stephen, so I move on. And the same, I think, goes for analysis. We have been talking about it quite a lot. What I would like to do is to take you to one of our cases where we collected data using Akvo Flow in Ethiopia. For that, I need to move on. This is an example of India, where we have plotted results on the map. I think it's kind of similar that was just presented on Pakistan about March. I think it's interesting to move on to the next one. And for this, I would like to open a website, which I will do quickly. I have to move this a bit here. Actually, what we did here is the data that we collected with Akvo Flow for this area in Ethiopia. We have moved on to start to analyze the data and visualize it. So it has been projected on a map, and we use for this CartoDB. And what I just would like to show you is you see the 4 different dots. The green one refers to households that are food secure, mildly food insecure are yellow, moderately orange, and the other one red. So this kind of gives you very quickly an overview about the status of household food security. If we zoom in, and every dot stands for one household. And actually what these visualizations, we use that with practitioners, so the teams in Ethiopia, and it kind of helps them also to analyze the data. And with this feature, one of the other things that can be helpful is that we can go and focus to one particular group. So what we could do is only look at the food secure household, for example. And then we realize that there's only one food secure household in that area. So in general, we found out that the food security situation was quite critical. And one other thing that we captured in the data is whether the answers were provided by female or male respondents. So here you could also do that shifting. So, for example, take out the male. And then have a look at what, if you see differences between female respondents and male respondents. So this has been really very helpful in starting to analyze the data. And of course, this is something that you really want to do with your local or national teams. Maybe, and there are a lot of other ways that you can start to analyze it. It was just to give you an example. In the case of this program, maybe it's interesting to let you know that we don't have, this is not going to be a project where we're going to implement directly interventions with the farmer households for production. But in this case, has been research where we would like to give back these data sets to local actors. So it will be self-help groups and it will be farmer cooperatives together with local authorities. And actually it is a base for a more lobby and advocacy program or a dialogue type of program where we kind of want to reflect on these results together with local actors. So we said before we start this dialogue about the local situations, there's a specific focus on self-help groups and on people with disabilities. Before we start to talk with local actors about how we could improve the situation, it would be good to gather some data so that we have some evidence about the local situation, and it could be we could reflect with people on this and then start this dialogue process. And what I forgot to mention is that while we have collected the data and have presented it, have processed it, there has been a kind of validation process where with the main results of this research, we have gone back to the areas and started to have some focus group discussions with people, presenting the data and see what type of other analysis of people, how would people read this, how would people react to this if they recognize the data, and start a discussion first with the people directly involved in this. Maybe quickly to the last slide. We had some successes and challenges. I think the successes, the use of the Flow tool, so far the donors we have to which we have presented are quite enthusiastic about it. The challenges I think are also mentioned before, no? That how to manage the amount of data, how to manage the quality of data. As for data analysis, I think the use of visualizations have turned out to be quite useful. And the challenges for data analysis is linked with other data sets well, the issue of knowledge base and skills within the organizations. And for this, we feel it's really important that these type of things are managed directly with teams in the region, in the countries. So this is really an area of constantly improving capacities and sharing those experiences. That's it for me. I think we quickly move to comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Marijke. So I know that I'm aware that it's the last breakout session, and we did start 15 minutes later than what we had originally planned. So I think we can have about 10 minutes or so. If there are many questions, are there any questions? Okay, Chitra.
Very interested in your slide where you were showing the differentiated respondents of male and female. And can you show that again? And also, did you share that with the community, and what was the reaction? Yeah, can you do the full and then female and then just male?
Sorry, yeah, Lisbeth, thanks. If you look at the female respondents, you might be able to conclude that in general the food security situation is less good than if you look. It's a bit, and if you look to the male, no, that it's relatively a bit better. But this is just one area. So actually there are 6 areas. I directly was not involved in the discussions bringing the data back to the regions. So I must say that I don't know exactly how people reacted to this, but it's definitely what we realized is how important it is to, whenever we do a survey, that we know who answered this. And actually, there's another example where we wanted to collect both at household level data on production and data on food security situation in the household. So there we decided to have the question or the interview, have it in 2 parts, so that you can both collect data from the male who is more responsible for the production and have part of the interview with the woman, and preferably talk to her on her own, by herself. These are things that are possible in Akvo Flow, that you can really separate part of the questionnaire, where you can say these answers have been provided by a male respondent and these have been by a female respondent, because it really, at the analyst side, when you start to process the data, it can really give you very interesting insights. And maybe one other thing, but it's a little bit about data quality. What is also very interesting if that you can always go back and see which enumerator collected which data sets. So there, that also has given us very interesting insights afterwards. For example, that from 8 enumerators, there was definitely one who had not been very well understood how to ask the questions about the household food security access skill, even though it's only 9 questions, but still it's very important. How do you ask them? How do you explain it? How do you, and that can really be, so it's the issue also about the quality of the enumerators, but also training of enumerators, and field testing with enumerators is very crucial. And one of the things that we did with the field testing is also to, because you can have the data at the same time, so it's real-time data collection, and you have them on the dashboard. We could even show the data that had been collected during field testing in the evening to the enumerators, and kind of letting them see what were the results of their own data collection and comparing among themselves. So that was, yeah.
Are there any other questions, perhaps from other developers? No? Okay, yeah, Michael.
On this issue of the food security and the related issues of vulnerability, are you able to put on the same graph comparing what men and women said about food security? You mentioned IFPRI. This is one of the things they worked on a great deal, the different perceptions. And I've worked in a slightly different field on looking at time use. And a very interesting exercise there is when you ask men to create a calendar of how they think their wife spends the day, and then you ask the wife, and then when you compare the two, men come to realize that women are doing a lot more things which they didn't realize. And this is a technique which is used for promoting intermediate means of transport by being able to put these two together. And I wondered if you were able to do that with this data on food security, so that you can then begin to discuss a little bit of whether men and women are talking about the same thing, or whether the man is thinking about the total food production and the woman is thinking about how it's allocated among different household members, because this can be a very useful technique for increasing awareness and thinking through some of the possible ways of distributing more effectively the food.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very true. What we did so far, and that was because of time limitation and resources, that, for example, in this case for Ethiopia, I think 600 households were interviewed, and it was either the male or the female responded these 9 questions. And if there is more possibility to do more research, then it would be very interesting within the same household ask the male and the man and the woman, because then you can really compare, because then it's a situation about the same household. So unfortunately, we were not able to do that, to have the same set of questions asked at the same person. The good thing is that I think with the Akvo Flow tool, you have the possibility that you can have part of the questionnaire, you can have it repeated. So in a way, technically, it's possible to do it. It's just a matter of how much time are we giving our enumerators to collect the data. And I think the other thing about time allocation, we do recognize that that is very important. So in the women empowerment, the pilot that we are doing, we also want to collect data about how do they spend their day. And we did a first pilot, and then we run into some issues with the Akvo Flow that we asked them how many hours they spent on about 15 different possibilities, just to make a standard. But then we realized once we started to analyze the data that some people had a day of 18 hours because they, and some had a day of 30 hours because we had forgotten, or we didn't find a way that we kind of made a check that if people were interviewed, that they would cover the full 24 hours, or whether they were under-reporting or over-reporting. So that is a technical issue that we still want to look into. But we do think that the issue of checking how people spend the day, and I think specifically also if we focus more on income generating, that it could also be that if we do more interventions also for women to start to work or to do more on income generating, that it does not automatically lead to overloading them if they have to combine reproductive tasks with economic production. So definitely an issue of intention.
Okay, are there any other questions? For me, from the independent evaluation of the ADB, I quite recognize Stefan's point that at the sort of front end of the process, you need to be heavily involved in the designing of the surveys or the platform. But in the ADB, when the baseline is collected at the start of the project, it's usually done by the operational departments. And then the project completion is also done by the operations, but the independent evaluation is designed by ourselves. And sometimes if we are too much involved in the design at this early stage of the project designing, we might be having a conflict of interest for the performance of the project. And so therefore, we would not be completely neutral in the assessment of the project performance. So I don't know how we can really solve this question, but it was very interesting for me to listen to the three speakers today. Thank you very much. And I think everyone is a bit jaded, and so I think it's time for the coffee break. Thank you very much.